Hi, this is John with Flat 6 Motorsports, and we're going to cover the main types of suspension options to upgrade your 991. So the 991 out of the box in the factory is a pretty good handling car, but there's definitely some upgrades you can do to enhance the handling, whether you're just looking for a little more spirited street driving or you actually want to track your car. Now there's definitely a lot of options such as sway bars, camber plates that are probably a little bit more track focused. Today we're going to focus just on the three primary options of lowering your 991. And so this gives it a better aesthetic look, but also lowers the center of gravity, so it allows the car to be a little more planted in turns, and a very popular first step for upgrading. So the three options are lowering springs, and we have kits from H&R. This kit right here is a H&R height adjustable lowering spring kit. So these are actually offered by MSS, H&R, and also KW. And what this does is it takes a lowering spring, but also an adjustable lower spring perch, so you can dial in the ride height of the car to your liking. So some folks that want to retain the factory PASM system, or possibly upgrade the PASM system with a DSC controller, which is another option if you want to utilize the factory shocks, can go with a lowering spring or height adjustable spring and keep that functionality in place. Now, if you want to keep that functionality in place with PASM, Bilstein also offers a Damptronic coilover kit, which is a full coilover kit with a revalve shock that also plugs and plays into the factory PASM. So your PASM button still works, the modes still work. So that's a really nice integration, particularly for somebody that's looking for more of a spirited street experience. Now, the other options are coilovers, and I kind of hinted on that with the Bilstein Damptronics, but Bilstein also offers a traditional coilover system along with Öhlins and JRZ. And those options essentially give you a brand new shock that's been revalved for greater performance. They have adjustability, depends on which shock package you go for, but it allows you to adjust rebound and sometimes compression. KW is also another popular brand that offers a variety of coilover systems for the 991. So we're going to today install these height adjustable springs on this 991.2 Carrera, but the process is pretty similar whether it's a Carrera, a Turbo, any variants. There are some fitment differences. So if you have any questions, definitely check us out at flat6.com. We're happy to answer anything. But we're going to get into this install process, show you how they go on, give you some impressions once it's all done.
Begin by disconnecting your battery with a 10mm socket to prevent shortening any of the sensors you will be disconnecting. Next, loosen the lug bolts with a 17mm socket and remove the wheels. Make sure you break the lugs loose with a wrench before using power tools. This practice will be used throughout the install process. Start with removing the interior trim pieces behind the rear seats. A firm pull will break free the trim pieces. You will need to tuck the carpet up and out of the way to access the three 13mm bolts on top of the strut assembly on both sides. If your car is equipped with PASM, disconnect the sensor next to the top of the strut tower. Coming back to the outside of the car, you'll need to disconnect the sway bar using a 13mm socket or wrench. Next, you will remove the lower control arm bolt using a 16mm socket and an 18mm wrench. Next, you will remove the bolt at the bottom of the strut assembly using a T55 torque socket and a 27mm wrench. Use a breaker bar with the T55 to loosen the bolt. Once the bolt spins freely, use the 27mm wrench or adjustable wrench to continue removing the bolt. Remove the ride height sensor that is clipped onto the upper control arm. With the strut assembly fully disconnected, you can now shimmy it out of place. We recommend using our wheel guide bolt and a pry bar to help leverage the bottom of the strut from the control arm. To properly install your new springs, it is best practice to use a spring stand. Begin by removing the 19mm nut on top of the strut assembly. Use a 9mm wrench to hold the PASM in place. With the spring dismounted, you can now remove the OEM perch by tapping it up and out. Before installing the new perch, make sure the surface is clear from any debris by wiping it down. Before installing your new perch, check your instructions about adjusting the perch ring on the strut assembly. With this H&R kit, we didn't have to adjust the ring, but it may vary depending on which brand suspension you are installing. Install the new perch. If it doesn't easily slide on, you can use a tapping method until it falls into place. It is important that you lock the perch in place using a 2.5mm Allen key. Not locking the perch in place can be hazardous while driving. Before installing the new spring, adjust the perch for the other side to assure your ride height will be even. You can now assemble and reinstall your rear struts. You can also reassemble your interior. Moving to the front of the car, you can begin by removing the 18mm bolt connecting the sway bar end link to the steering knuckle. Next, you will be removing the caliper. Before removing the caliper, use a pry bar to retract the piston. Use a T55 socket to remove the caliper bolts. Remove the brake line bracket with a 10mm socket. Disconnect the wheel speed sensor. Moving to the top of the car, you'll need to remove the plastic shrouding covering the top of the strut assembly. If your car is equipped with PASM, disconnect the sensor next to the top of the strut tower. Using a 13mm socket, remove the 3 bolts on top of the strut assembly. You can now remove the strut assembly. To gain enough clearance, you can use the flat 6 guide bolt to help clear the fender. To remove the strut from the knuckle, gently tap up from the bottom. As a reminder, it is best practice to use a spring stand to install your new springs. Begin by removing the 21mm nut on top of the strut assembly. Use a pair of vice grips to hold the shock from spinning freely. Before removing the OEM perch, you have to remove the dust cap by tapping it up and out. Before installing the new perch, make sure the surface is clear from any debris by wiping it down. Install the new perch. If it doesn't slide on, you can use a tapping method until it falls into place. Before reinstalling the top hat, you have to cut the dust boot to seat properly. Finish assembling the strut and reinstall. You can now reconnect your battery and mount your wheels.
All right, so we're in this particular 991.2 Carrera with the height adjustable springs from H&R, and we actually have the sport suspension mode selected, and a very comfortable car. I mean, that's the really nice thing about doing just springs or height adjustable spring is you keep a lot of that OEM comfort feel to it, but you do add with the lower center of gravity and slightly larger, a slightly stiffer spring rate, you get a little bit more performance out of it. So we'll take a couple turns up here and just kind of feel out the chassis a little bit. So turn-in's very nice, consistent with the stock car. And just, yeah, very, confidence inspiring. The newer 911s with the slightly longer wheelbase and, wider track just give you a very nice balanced feel, particularly for a rear engine car. Very stable, very composed. Just kind of gives you that OEM plus type feel with these particular height adjustable springs. So overall, very impressed with the ride quality, the performance level of the car. This is a great option for somebody looking just to kind of take it up just a little notch, and maybe you don't want to go to a full coilover setup. Very composed. I don't think this will disappoint. I hope you found this episode to be informative and helpful. If you have any questions regarding suspension setup for your 991, feel free to check out all the options we have at flat6.com. We have a whole section for 991 suspension. And of course, if you have any questions specific to your setup or anything you want to chat about, feel free to reach out to us. It's info@flat6motorsports.com. We'll see you in the next one.